I'm Jane Hanson. This week in the arena, we step into the Catholic blogosphere. There are thousands of Catholics who have set up their own weblogs or blogs and are connecting Catholics around the world as never before. This week, we're going to meet a few of them and talk about how they do what they do and what this means for the new evangelization. Joining me is Father Kieran Harrington, the Director of Communications for the Diocese of Brooklyn, Elizabeth Scalia, who contributes to Inside Catholic and runs the blog known as the Anchoress, and Deacon Kandra, who is news director here at NET and who also has a blog called The Deacon's Bench, and that's not about construction. Thank you all for being here. As the Vicar of Communications for the Diocese, how important are blogs? I mean, the Dalai Lama, for example, is on Twitter. The Pope has has a site on YouTube. How important is all of this new media for the church?
It's critical because you really have to be ubiquitous, right? You have to be everywhere in order for the message to get out. And we're preaching the most important message, right? The good news. And so we have to be on the net, on television. We have to be in print. We have to be everywhere. And it really is it's a question of trying to figure out how do all these things work together to ensure that the gospel message is being received. So.
Deacon, you are not only the news director here at the NET, you worked for CBS News for years, and now you've got this blog of your own. What was it that prompted you to start it?
Too much free time on my hands.
Oh, I don't buy that, but...
That didn't last very long. I've always been an admirer of Elizabeth's blog, The Anchoress, and shortly after I was ordained, I started Googling around and looking, and I realized that there really weren't any blogs out there by deacons for deacons. So I decided that I would start one, and just a couple of weeks after my ordination, I set up the Deacon's Bench and started putting up news about deacons, some of my homilies, interesting news that struck me, links to other people's blogs like Elizabeth's, and just sort of took off from there.
Well, yours has been around for how long?
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years. Yours has been about 5.
Going on 5 years.
So what made you create it?
I started hanging around the internet on political forums and opining on everything. Realized I have an opinion on everything, and so I might as well just put it out there. Also, I'm a compulsive writer. I'm a compulsive consumer of news and a writer. So it just was a great outlet for me.
So how do people find out about the Anchoress? I mean, what connects them to you? Because you're read all over the country, in fact, all over the world, right? So
it's growing, yeah. The blog is growing.
But I mean, that's an interesting question, because one of my problems in finding blogs is I'm not quite sure where to go, and then I get a little exasperated. And then, I mean, there are thousands of Catholic blogs once you start looking for them.
Yeah, in my case, I think Google helped me along quite a lot, because my blog kind of it's the intersection of politics and religion. And I think probably at least half of my readers are not even Catholic. They're evangelicals and Baptists and Episcopalians, and we learn a lot from each other. But I think people just would Google the news of the day, and there I'd be pontificating, and so well, let's go see what she has to say, and then they hang around.
But is it as simple as that? Is that you put your opinion out on a specific matter, they Google, and your name comes up?
It's really strange. I mean, it basically was, I read something on a blog that I liked, and I linked to it, and because I linked to it, they linked back to me, and then it kind of exponentially grew. I remember my first big blog burst, if you will, actually came from Andrew Sullivan. I was writing about one of my brothers who was dying of cancer, and Andrew, being a gay man who's HIV, wrote about that and said, oh, you should go see what she said. And then I got what they call a blog burst. I had like 10,000 hits in a day, which was phenomenal at the time. And then when Pope John Paul II was dying, I live blogged that. I know that sounds very strange, but it was kind of like just keeping watch.
The experience of a Catholic watching the Pope die is really what
basically,
it was.
Yeah, and also linking into everything else, because there was so much going on. There was, Richard O'Brien talking on one channel and Sister Joan Chittister talking on another channel, and so it was like, right now so-and-so said this, and right now so-and-so said that, and the National Review is saying this, and they were linking back and forth to me, and it became this enormous grab bag of information coming out from every side, and I just sort of collected it and threw it out there to people, And then I would take my son to work. We would talk about the Pope dying on the way back, and I'd say, you know what my son said while we were talking about this? And it was very real-time shared experience with a lot of other people.
Greg, you've talked about the blog site being, or blogs being, confessionals, pulpits, and sanctuaries. In a certain sense, there's a little bit of that that's frightening to me, but there's another sense of it that's kind of, it's very connected and very comforting.
It's been very interesting to me from my experience, the people that I've heard from, again, from all over the world. You never realize just what you're doing until suddenly you get a letter from somebody in the Azores or an email from a monk at a Benedictine monastery in Rome, sharing some thoughts about something that you've posted. And I was even astounded to see that somebody in Saudi Arabia linked to my site, and I went there and it was all in Arabic.
Then you have to get the Google Translate thing and see what they're saying about it.
Yeah.
How do you think that that helps in the transmission of ideas, but how does it also inhibit the transmission of ideas?
I don't know. I think people feel secure when there is a little bit of that distance, and there's a little bit of safety. People will say things on the internet and in the comment boxes and in emails that they might not say to you in person, or
Which could be good or could be bad.
Right.
I mean, it's almost the same philosophy of how sometimes when you meet a stranger, you'll tell strangers something that you might not tell your best friend because there's an anonymity and it's not going to come back to haunt you.
But you know those experiences when you meet the stranger and all of a sudden you get like too much information.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I was kind of surprised to find out that there are Catholic blog awards. You're the recipient.
Yeah, I've won a few of them for political commentary. None of them seem to think I'm terribly spiritual. I haven't won any of those.
Do you guys worry a lot about disinformation?
Not really. I know that the blogs that I link to are generally people who know what they're writing about. I know they're the people that if I don't know something, I'll go to them and say, hey, tell me about this. So I don't worry about that at all. And like I said, I find the blog, I've learned so much from it, not just about the church, but about other religions and about other belief systems. And I have Baptist readers who have taught me so much about, how they approach Scripture, and they know Scripture so well. And what's interesting is that they'll get a Catholic perspective that they haven't seen because they've looked at the Bible one way. And so that's been really a wonderful kind of sharing and growing.
So would you see this, Greg, as a tool then for helping people understand each other better?
Oh yeah, it's a wonderful way to connect. I've written that it's a new way of being church, and in many ways it is. It connects people with common interests, and even people who disagree about a lot of issues, they can come together and they can talk about them and argue about them and pray about them and share their insights and their feelings about things.
Yeah.
We have about a minute before the break, but can each one of you describe for me what might have been the most profound story or experience that you've had through your blog?
I just had an email from a Protestant minister, and I had written about the Feast of the Ascension and some talk about Mary. And he wrote to me and he said, my daughter is going through a situation right now that's very tough. Could you please go talk to Mary for my daughter? Because Mary was a mother with a child, and maybe she'll understand what my daughter is going through. And I was so moved that he would ask me to do this. And he wrote, I know I shouldn't be asking this because I'm a Protestant minister, but I was very moved and really humbled by it. And I wrote back and I said, I'd be glad to do that. This is why we think of Mary as the person we can go to. And I talked about the wedding at Cana. And I said, please let me know how it goes with your daughter. But it was very moving for me. In fact, it's giving me chills just thinking about it right now.
Last summer, there was, before I went to bed one night, I just checked my blog to see if there were any comments or any emails, and a teacher from Newark, New Jersey had sent me an email. One of his high school students had been killed, and he was so distraught about it. And he had been a regular reader of my blog. He had never contacted me before, but he just needed to reach out to someone to let me know how he was feeling. And we exchanged a couple of emails after that, but it was, again, this experience of connectedness. He couldn't find a clergy person that he could speak to, but he felt like this was a sanctuary or a confessional where he could come and just share his
Unburden
feeling.
himself.
Yeah, it
And
was,
there is a real sense of ministry toward each other, I find, with the people who email.
it was very poignant.
Yeah, it is very poignant. Those are really incredible stories. Thank you very much for sharing them. Thank you, Deacon, for being here with us. We appreciate it. Father Harrington, Elizabeth, we'll be back with both of you in we're going to be back in just a moment. We're going to meet one of the newest Catholic bloggers and hear his impressions of the blogosphere. So stay with us. Welcome back. Catholics who use the internet know that there are blogs out there for almost every interest and every taste. One of the newest and one growing in popularity was launched in January. It's called McNamara's blog. Here to talk about his experience starting the blog is McNamara himself, Dr. Patrick McNamara, assistant archivist for the Diocese of Brooklyn. And adding his own insight from Commonweal magazine, associate editor Grant Gallicho. Welcome. Thanks for being here. So what was that experience like starting a blog, and how did you decide that the world needed another one?
Well, I first heard of blogs. I thought that they were generally insidious things where people tell the whole world what they had for breakfast, and I really had no interest in ever starting one until I was talking to Greg Kandra, and Greg gave me a different perspective on it, looking at it as a form of ministry. And since I had a doctorate in church history, and I had tons and tons of useless information about the history of the Catholic Church, I thought to myself, well, why not put this online? And so what I've done is create a blog where every day I feature something that happened somewhere in the history of the Catholic Church, whether it's local, national, or international. And the response has been great. It's had 30,000 hits since January 1st, and I'm really amazed at the reaction of people.
Yeah, it must have been kind of stunning going into this thinking, do I really want to do it? Because it's a lot of work.
It is, but when, I rely a lot on the notes I've taken over the years, my lecture notes from teaching, articles I've written in the past. So I have a pretty good command of the material, so I can kind of pick and choose what I want to feature that day. If it's a particular holiday, if it's a season, some current event that it's relevant to.
And Grant, I know that your publication, Commonweal, has a regular blog site. One of the things that veteran reporters have told me is that this notion of blogging, in addition to everything else, can be really time-consuming.
It is. But for us, since we're a pretty small magazine, we needed to figure out a way to drive traffic to our site. And we come out every 2 weeks. So in order to get daily content, we thought, well, why don't we launch this blog? We'll get some of our regular writers. And it's been a bit of a time drain, but our web traffic has about tripled.
So it's been worth it.
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure it's been worth it for my sanity, but.
But isn't it also true that it's an outlet for you? It's an outlet to maybe to enhance a story, or to make
Sure.
the experience of covering a story, or even to put your own thoughts into places where you might not otherwise be able to put them?
Yeah, one of the nice things about having a blog is you can test theories. And since we have comments enabled, our readers can come in and hack away at them or strengthen your piece, your argument.
One of the things that kind of bothers me about blogs is you consider, the average length of a piece is so short. How can you really do an analysis, especially a news analysis of a blog piece? And seeing as more and more people are going to blogs, is that going to really break down our sense of understanding and not having a real grasp of the issues?
I think different blogs do different things. So that I think that your blog, for example, it's not the same kind of, it's not a journalistic exploration, right?
No, not at all. No, it's just something to kind of provide people with a little bit more of an awareness of Catholic Church history and really what a great heritage we have as a church that unfortunately a lot of people go through their whole lives without really learning much about.
But what you're talking about yours is about information. Right. One, I think a great concern, and really, Father, is about disinformation, about untruths and being out there.
One of the things, remember Senator Obama, right, when he was running for president, everyone immediately put out information that he was a Muslim, right? And you think about how that caught like wildfire all throughout the country. So it's very easy for someone to post a rumor. It's the old game of telephone. You tell one person a story, and by the 10th person, it's completely different. Well, on the internet, that's just magnified exponentially. So that's it.
It makes magazine editors very nervous
Oh, yeah.
Because we, consider ourselves to be gatekeepers in some sense. People send us manuscripts, we edit them, we decide what to publish. When you have a blog and you have readers who can come to your site, all they need to do is sign up, get a username and a password, and they can write whatever they want. We can edit it, but it's kind of a Wild West kind of feeling to it. And it's not a natural thing for magazine editors, at least, to sort of set the game in motion and then watch.
One of the questions is how do they monetize the content? How do people make a living off of this blogosphere?
You can't. It's just a hobby for me, at least.
Yeah.
But
But you
it's
have
a-
30,000 people, you said, right?
30,000 hits since January 1st.
Wow.
And what kind of reaction do you get? What do people say to you?
Very positive for the most part. People saying thank you. I never knew about this. I had no idea. Thank you for sharing this. It's something I get a lot, and so I think it's the gratitude that you get from people, the sense that you're letting people know more about the history of a great organization that keeps me doing it.
Grant, I'm curious, what kinds of, there have had to have been times when you're just infuriated over the responses you're getting on the blog.
Sure.
Can you talk about that part of it?
Sure. We cover a lot of controversial subjects on our blog, from controversial political questions to church questions, and I think that Commonweal magazine typically gets pegged as a liberal magazine. And there are a lot of people who consider themselves very conservative who like to come to our website and drop little bomblets and then kind of walk away. And they set little fires in the comment boxes. I think abortion is a very, very tough thing. There's a lot of name calling that happens around that particular issue. So I'm always very sensitive if someone puts a post up about that topic, and we have a group blog, so it's not just one person. If someone puts that up, I always have to spend a lot of time watching that thread to make sure that it doesn't get ugly and people start pointing fingers and calling names.
It's interesting that whenever the New York Times runs an article about the Catholic Church, I look at the comments in the New York Times, the comments, readers' comments, and it's to that point, I am astounded by the anti-Catholic sentiment that still is so pervasive in our culture. Recently there was an article in the front page of the New York Times. It had like 161 comments about schools, and what were people saying? You should close these Catholic schools down. They're indoctrinating people anyway. To me, it's really interesting to get a sense of what is really in the minds and hearts of people out there.
It's really a way of kind of checking trends, really, and I've talked to a lot of editors and reporters who say they use it as a means of really trying to find out what kind of is underneath the surface and what people are really, truly thinking. But on the other hand, if you're sitting at your computer and you're irritated at something, maybe you had a rotten meal that night and now you're reading something you don't like, it's very quick and very easy to respond to it with just a little hit of the send button, and maybe not being as rational as you could be.
Have you gotten any very angry responses to any of your postings, Pat?
No, it's been pretty calm. I think most of the time, what I've done is just when you're just telling a story, most of the time, what I'm writing about, nobody really knows anything about. So it's hard for people to get angry in a case like that.
So there's nobody to say you're wrong.
Exactly.
Well, what's been the most interesting comment?
I would say that I can't say that there was really one most interesting comment. Well, I would say this. I did a piece on Henriette DeLille, who is an African-American woman who started a religious community, the Sisters of the Holy Family in New Orleans. And I got a comment from the woman who produced the film on her life, The Courage to Love, I think it was, with Vanessa Williams, and saying, thank you so much for doing this. I'm trying to advance her cause for canonization, so anybody who is helping, make the public more aware about her, I really appreciate that. And I think that was the most interesting of the comments. You don't always get movie producers sending emails thanking you.
Well, and again, it's all about the connection part, which means that that is a useful connection, which I think really is probably the essence of the usefulness of blogs. Would you agree?
Sure. No, it can be, and from a sort of bare business point of view, it's nice for us because the way in which you get people to come back to your site is to establish some kind of relationship, and that's what comments do for us.
All right. Thank you so much, Patrick, for being
Thank
with us.
you.
We really appreciate it. What is the blog site again?
It's Irish Catholic Humanist blogspot.com, but you can Google McNamara's blog.
And then we'll find it. Thank you so much for being with us
you.
today. And Grant, Father Harrington will be back in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Rejoining us is Elizabeth Scalia. And I guess my first question really is to you. Sometimes on all these Catholic blogs, you may see some very unchristian behavior.
Oh,
and I'm
indeed.
curious about, the venom that may become directed towards you or your site.
I've had emails from people who are Catholic who have called me a heretic because maybe I've made a mild criticism of a cardinal, or I've gone into maybe a more thoughtful exposition of why we do something and where I might see someone else's point of view and even agree with it. And I'll get emails from people saying, well, you're agreeing with it. You're not much of a Catholic. How dare you call yourself a Catholic? How dare you write as a Catholic? Who the hell made you Pope anyway? And it can get very, very ugly. Very ugly.
Grant, do you see the blogs as having, some great redeeming value for the ability to connect in ways that we couldn't before?
I think the jury is still out on that. I'm not sure if they're redeeming anyone. I mean, certainly not me. But I think for us, it's a very useful way to get on top of news stories. If there's a Catholic story that breaks and there's some, not so great news account in one of the major papers, say, and we want to correct it, or.
But doesn't that make you get concerned about like citizen journalism too?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think there's some it's a very powerful tool, and it's new. It's very new, and we're still not sure exactly. It's not settled. Will the citizen journalist rise and produce good stuff or not? There, a couple of weeks ago, there was a very important story happening on the West Coast that had to do with the sexual abuse crisis, and the only person in court covering it was a blogger, and she's very well intentioned, but she cannot write.
But why is that? Why weren't quote unquote real journalists in there covering
Because
it?
there aren't that many of them left.
Right, they're being
Right.
downsized and everything else.
Right.
But I mean, the question though, and from my perspective, again, it comes back to this idea of how do we digest information? I mean, how do we verify? When you're writing in a traditional paper, I mean, there's triple checking of
Yes.
facts, and that doesn't happen
And
on
there's also the threat of lawsuits for for
Libel and-
maliciousness
yeah.
and libel and all of that. So I mean that's been a tradition that's been in journalism for
a long time.
A very
but, I
long
mean, you
time.
consider what's the typical length of a piece in Commonweal, and what's the typical length of a piece on the blog?
Right, yeah.
I mean, right away, you get to see that there's
But it's a
an
different-
inability to get into the nuances of
But
issues.
it's like though Twitter, for example, is 140 characters maximum, and with the tragedy that happened in Mumbai, when was that? January, I think. At any rate, there was a message a second coming on Twitter that was really talking about what was going on from people that were there in the middle of it, which is it's a new and unusual way of telling a news story, and there's a real
Sometimes
validity to it.
Sometimes it's overwhelming too. Sometimes you have so much coming at you from news and from other blogs that you have to just sit down and say, I don't even know where to look first. I don't know what fire to put out first. I don't know what story to get in front of first. And then you have to finally say, where's my focus? All right, that one. But I mean, it can really make you feel overwhelmed.
But with the huge number of Catholic blogs that are out there, aren't you concerned, Father, about there being so much that isn't true or is misrepresented?
One of the very, very popular blogs for priests, of course, is Whispers in the Loggia, right? Rocco Palma. I mean, Rocco has a profound impact, really. I mean, you think for a moment about the revival of the Old Mass, and he broke that story. And it was like a tidal wave in ecclesiastical circles. So the blog, it's really the timeliness of release of information and the ability of people. Once this stuff gets out on a blog, you have to respond right away. So it's very difficult to make sure your message is all together before the blogger goes out and puts it up online.
Can I also say, in terms of worrying about wrong information getting out, my experience anyway has been that if you're not putting out the right stuff, first of all, there are plenty of people out there who will, correct you very quickly, but also your blog is not going to succeed if you're not putting out the stuff.
Well,
and that's really...
I guess that's comforting to
I don't know. Is that really true? I mean, sometimes I think it's the loudest one in the room who gets the most traffic.
I don't think so. I really don't. I mean, I've been doing this for 5 years, almost 5 years, and what I've seen are the people who really put the time and effort into doing the research and writing well and, cutting back on the foul language and presenting things professionally. And I'll go off the Catholic and talk about someone who's not a Catholic writer. He writes politics, Ed Morrissey from Hot Air. Yeah, the man is very, very professional. I would put him up against any journalist anytime. I think that a good product will always sell itself, and a bad one won't. Leave it up to the free market.
He looks like he's a little skeptical, but I guess we will see. Thank you, because that's got to be our last word. The Anchoress. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Elizabeth. Father.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we have been talking a lot this week about the internet. You should know that the net is on the net. You can watch us anytime at www.netny.net. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Jane Hanson. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time in the arena.